Hi, and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce, and wow, just wow. From time to time, I've talked about the number of 90-degree days we have had here where I live, and we had a streak going at the end of last week, a week ago. That ended on Saturday, and then Sunday a week ago was the first day of, as far as you could see, no 90-degree days were forecast. Even the 7 or 10-day forecast, no 90 degrees. Which was pretty remarkable, but we had already had 54 after the streak ended on Saturday. We usually get 28, so that's a significant difference. All right, so Wednesday, things happened. Several things happened. Florida and Georgia, of course, got hit with very suddenly formed tropical storm Julia. And although I was not affected, I knew of a movie shoot that had to be completely canceled. It was to be in Savannah, Georgia. Well, anyway, here it was, the day began weird. There was a fog sort of, but the temperature conditions were exactly right. The ground, as it does, stayed just warm enough, so the fog didn't begin until about 60 feet up. I know you could call it a cloud, but it really wasn't very thick either. But then, just several minutes later, now the sun had actually come above the horizon, and it was breathtaking. Not because of the sun or the fog, but see, I'm about a 7-iron away from a water tower, and the angle this time of year, the sun was right behind the water tower, but it was illuminating it from underneath, behind it, and the thin fog almost made for a bridal veil. I did take some pictures, but they don't do justice to what I saw. Anyway, no warning, nobody had it forecast, 93 degrees. So now we have 55 90-degree days. We're supposed to have 28. If we get just one more, we have doubled our number. Oh, and we learned this week, too, that NOAA revealed that August was the 11th month in a row for setting a new record. Heat, of course. Hottest August ever. But what makes it worst is that it tied with July. July is supposed to be warmer than August, so now the two stand as the hottest months ever since they began keeping records. You know, I am always confounded by what to say to climate change deniers. Even among Republicans, there are now several that acknowledge that global warming is real. And more than a couple, scientists and meteorologists who were skeptics have changed their mind. Yet most of the Republican politicians remain betrothed to the fossil fuel industries. If asked, they nearly always say, well, I'm not a scientist. Yeah, I know, I'm not a scientist either. But that's why, when scientists, 95% or more of them say that it's real, what are we waiting for? What are they waiting for? Really, I get it. They're not waiting for anything except the next donation, the next campaign contribution that comes from the teat of the fossil fuel industry. That seems to be more important to them than their children and their grandchildren's future, and I find that unimaginable. But there you go. Really cool illustration came out this week, almost a cartoon. It was in Popular Science, and it is perfect. Show this to those who say, well, climate has always been changing. It varies. Yes, that is absolutely true. And we can measure pretty far back, thanks to core sampling and other Earth science studies. So, this illustration shows the average global temperature starting the last ice age, 24,000 years ago, 22,000 BCE, before the Common Era. Back then, what's now Boston and New York, they were under glaciers, almost a mile thick. The glaciers what carved out the lowlands that became the Great Lakes, but farther east, almost a mile thick. So then we start to warm, things start to happen. The dotted vertical line on the left, watch it compared to the center. The center represents the average global temperature at the end of the 20th century. That 0 is our baseline. Horizontal lines, each faint one represents 100 years. Every 500 years is a little bit thicker. So, starting 24,000 years ago, on average it was more than 4 degrees Celsius cooler than it is now. The warming starts slowly, then it accelerates. Still, it takes almost another 10,000 years. You have to get to 13,500 BCE just to get to 3 degrees cooler than now. In all that time, they gained about 1.5 degrees. And I said this is informational. It's also fun. The illustrator put in lots of humor among the facts. Look at this one. 13,400 years BCE, when humans and dogs began a bonding that continues to this day. When you go forward between 85 and 9,000 BCE, the average temperature rises above our baseline for the first time. Now, during some of this warming, what's going on is these huge ice sheets are in retreat. They're melting from areas like our New England and our Pacific Northwest and parts of Europe, and all of this melting is causing a huge rise in sea level. What we think of as normal sea level today wasn't normal low those many years ago. The rising sea level is why the land bridge between Asia and Alaska is gone. It's why the British Isles are isles. They're no longer connected to Europe. Meanwhile, history becomes history. We know of people. We know they have names. Some of them do things of note. It is particularly busy between 600 BCE and year 1 of the Common Era. During this time, paper is invented. We can write things down. Confucius is there. Buddha is there. Alexander the Great. Caesar. Jesus. The temperature. 2,000 years ago, right there at the baseline. If you scroll through the timeline at a fast speed and watch the dotted line, it wavers, yes, but it's always a very gentle wave. It does cool down a bit between 1600 and 1700. It became known as the Little Ice Age. But then look what happens. The 20th century begins, and now the advances in technology require more and more fossil fuels get burned. And it's not that we're just, right now, like 1 degree warmer. It's that line, in all of that time, 24,000 years of time, the line has wavered gently until the last 20 years or so, when the angle goes boom, the speed of change explodes. The climate has always been changing, yes, but never ever like this. Never. Oh, and look at the projections. If we did everything right, if the whole world agreed right now, it's an emergency, and we began tomorrow doing every possible corrective action, we'd still end up a bit warmer than we are right now. Meaning we'd still be having lots of months of hottest ever. We'd have once in 100-year rains several times a year. Hurricanes would be frequent and strong. And that's if we did everything that was possible to do. But we're not doing that. So instead, if we do a bit, and we find some ways to work together and are able to slow it down, that still ends up somewhere over 2 degrees warmer than our baseline. But we're not even doing that. Our present course instead takes us to, wow. Making it all worse, we're apparently near the tipping point, where no matter what we do, it'll go irreversibly out of control if we stop burning all fossil fuels. Still can't go back. We should all know that the Arctic is already in trouble. Polar bears have less and less ice. There's more polar bears drowning now because there's too much ocean to swim. The distance is greater than it once was. And this warming accelerates because ice and snow reflect sunlight. Ocean water is dark. It absorbs sunlight. It absorbs heat. If you'd like to see the timeline yourself, it's entertaining, it's informative. Google Popular Science Global Warming Timeline and you will find it. Bernie Sanders was right. He said the biggest threat we face is global warming. It makes deserts out of formerly fertile fields. That's what started the crisis in Syria, by the way. And as the waters rise and there's more deserts, there's more people and less land and less arable land. What do you think the outcome is? More people, less land. The inevitable outcome is people behaving badly toward each other on a massive scale. So back in May, HBO premiered a movie called All the Way. It starred Bruce Cranston as President Lyndon Johnson, and Frank Langella was Senator Richard Russell of Georgia. A friend back then told me he thought it was sensational, but I don't subscribe to HBO, so I had to wait till it came out on Netflix. Well, I saw it. It's nominated for 8 Emmy Awards, and Cranston is likely, I think, to win one. They're on tonight. We could find out. As it happens, I previously had read, not all of them, I think 3 or 4 Robert Caro books on LBJ. I knew some of his backroom dealing and how he could move people almost by force of will. He did that when he was the Senate Majority Leader, and he did it when he was president. I remember one particular line from one of the books very well. When someone told him why they disagreed with him on some legislation that he wanted, he would say, "Well, hell, I understand that, but what I want to know is, can I count on you?" Caro said that he was probably the best salesman in the history of salesmen. I mentioned Senator Russell because he was, at the time, one of the most respected men ever to be in either chamber of Congress ever. It is true, he was a segregationist, but he was an honorable man. He was a segregationist. But he was born in the late 19th century. He was born white. He was born white in the late 19th century in Georgia, and it would have been impossible for him to be otherwise. It was Senator Russell who guided young Lyndon's career. The two were friends, and they were both from the South. And I remembered some of that as I was watching this movie, and what struck me was perspective. You may recall earlier this summer I spoke of Dinesh D'Souza's movie, Hillary's America. It's said to be a documentary. I suppose it could be termed that, but instead it has a point of view. And he presents her as evil incarnate. Okay, he's got a point of view. He takes shots at her and at virtually every Democratic president, and especially Lyndon Johnson. Now, in one of the scenes of that movie, Johnson is telling a group of men who are not identified, but he's talking in a duplicitous voice, that in his pursuit of civil rights legislation, he's merely offering the Negroes, as he called African Americans, offering the Negroes some scraps. I got to offer them something, he says, to get their votes. Well, you know what? In the HBO movie, he tells Senator Russell largely the same thing, but here's the perspective. In the HBO movie, he was telling that to his friend, his mentor. He told him that to intentionally mislead him, while he, the president, worked behind the scenes to get the Civil Rights Bill passed. In essence, he betrayed his friend to get around his friend's certain opposition. So while the D'Souza's movie portrays LBJ as lying to black people, this perspective says he lied to the segregationists so he could get the legislation passed. Which perspective is true? Well, I wasn't there. And it's certainly too late for anyone, even psychics, to read LBJ's mind, but we have history. He did push through the Civil Rights Bill. And the next year, as promised, he again pushed through the Voting Rights Act. That is the record. Anyway, I thought it was a pretty good movie. I would recommend it, especially if you're into politics and things like that.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
Welcome back. If you like our shows, you know you can see them all at our Facebook page or at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel, which of course you can also subscribe to. And you can write to us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com. You wouldn't think that would be so hard for me to remember. All right, so what's the big news this week? Well, let's drop back a few weeks. I've shown you from time to time the way the far right has insisted that Hillary Clinton is about to drop out of the race. She's so sick. She's desperately ill. She's got Parkinson's. She's having mini strokes. They show her coughing. Naturally, they had fun with the fact that a week ago, at the 9/11 ceremony, she left early and she nearly did fall down. They did have to catch her. So, the coughing, on September 9th, 2 days previous, she went to her doctor about the coughing, diagnosed with pneumonia. Gee, that's a real illness. Antibiotics, 4 days of rest, she's back out campaigning. But they sure had, in the evening, in the morning, they sure had some fun. Anyway, just this past week, Alex Jones repeated what he said a few weeks ago. He said that the Secret Service came forward to tell him of her ill health. I love they use the phrase, told us on the record. That's exactly what they did not do. On the record means names and quotes, but instead it's, they told us. And he also amped it up this week. He said she's now falling down, passing out every 15 to 30 minutes. And both he and Josh Bernstein have said that there are always people with EpiPens ready to inject her. And Josh Bernstein, this is for you, EpiPens are called that because they inject epinephrine, that's adrenaline, which accelerates one's metabolism. Not, as you say, would they inject diazepine, which is Valium and slows things down. Oh, and Alex Jones says, he said this past week that she is going to drop out of the race by the end of this upcoming week. So, the extreme right sees her a week ago Sunday and says, see, she's sick. And I say, we'll see. Anyone can get sick. She rested for a few days, back out campaigning, but if she is as sick as they say, she won't make it through the debates. If she is that sick, the mainstream media is going to be exposed as frauds, just as the extreme right says they are. But if she goes out and campaigns and doesn't pass out and doesn't have mini strokes and makes it through the debates, then I repeat, then the extreme right will be exposed as just making the stuff up. We'll find out. Oh, and this Josh guy, this guy is scary. Look what he said a week and a half ago.
Let me tell you something right now. This goes directly to the Department of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, the Obama administration, and any other scumbag that thinks that they're going to hack this election. You go ahead and try it. You will meet a resistance like you've never seen before. There are 100 million Americans in this country that are armed, locked, and loaded, just waiting for the opportunity and the chance to go ahead and start the revolution. So you go ahead and you try it and you just see what happens. You can take that for any way you would like it.
In the immortal words of Charlie Brown, oh, good grief. This guy has a really dark, nasty view of the world. He seems to harbor a lot of hate inside. The debate monitors were announced a couple of weeks ago. Listen to what he had to say about them. Notwithstanding the fact that they are experienced and have had distinguished careers.
But one thing that's driving me nuts is what's with the debates? I mean, Martha Radical Raditz, Anderson Cooper, and Matt Lauer, really? These are the best three people, these total Clintonista hacks that we have to moderate the debates? I mean, what happened? Was the Ayatollah, Kim Jong-un, and Justin Trudeau not available? Is George Soros going to be the timekeeper at these debates? Unbelievable.
I suppose he'd only be pleased if he were asked to moderate, or maybe Alex Jones. Anyway, the first debate is just over, a week away, September 26th. It will be moderated by NBC's Lester Hope. All right, briefly, I promise. I mentioned Hillary, got to talk a little bit about Donald. He released his medical records this week. No, he didn't. He gave Dr. Oz a piece of paper, and Dr. Oz says, well, okay, looks good. But the more newsworthy part, on Friday, despite 5 years of constantly questioning President Obama's long-form birth certificate, it was released in 2011. For 5 years, he's been hacking on it, Finally, Friday, he walked that back. This is the guy who says, I have a very good brain. Maybe. I've seen better. All right, so after all of that slime surfing, I think the rest of the way we will spend in a more uplifting way. First, I had absolutely no idea this could be done. Take a look at this. Apparently, it's not a trick. More than one report shows how to do this, which means once you get yourself started, if you have enough of them, you might never need to buy lettuce again. I only just saw this, and I have one begun. I will let you know how it goes. All right, time for a smile. See, I didn't want to say the phrase butt nuggets without you seeing the picture first. All right, midweek, this went viral. I got to tell you, when I first saw it, I had some concern, but take a look.
Okay, here we go. Come on, Joe. Come on.
Loves it, eh?
Up and down into the 25. Okay, here we go.
Hey, I think if I did that a few times, I would.
Her face is hilarious when she does it.
Come on, Joe. Okay. There we go. I get slower now, though. Okay, here we go.
See, at first I thought the dog might be scared, but no, the dog obviously knows what comes next. Can't get to the top of the stairs fast enough to get the next ride. So that was, by the way, that was somewhere in Canada, and the film was made before the fair opened, the day before, which is why there was no one in line. Speaking of dogs, I found this truism. All right, since we're speaking of dogs and food, a couple of weeks ago I told you that my dog Katie and our new household member, Calico the cat, were largely indifferent to each other's presence. That remains true, but I have learned that Katie is not indifferent to Calico's food, and she certainly won't guard it. Oh, speaking of cats, one reason I wanted to integrate the Calico cat into the household, she had been living outside. She showed up in January, and once I started feeding her, I wasn't worried that she'd starve. But she is a little cat. There are a lot of hawks and eagles that patrol the skies around here. And a week ago or so, someone posted this, not my neighborhood, but apparently in the neighborhood, lots of the cats were going missing. And then someone's camera caught this moment in time. I am very glad Calico cat is inside. Oh, another creative truth. What do you get if you combine wine with dinner? Well, winner. Finally, if you're able to take a moment Thursday morning, depending where you are, here where I am, it's Eastern Daylight Time, the time to pay attention to 10:21 in the morning. See if you can balance an egg or not. But that's the moment that the sun will be directly over the equator. So we, Northern Hemisphere folks, will bid adieu to summer and begin the official start of autumn. Oh, and for heaven's sakes, as someone once said, William Wadsworth? Anyway, do not start at rats to nod. Do not start at rats to nod. Certainly not. Okay, with that, I hope that your start of autumn, you know what? May your entire week be the best one you've ever had.